G'day and welcome to today's episode of We Used to Be Journos, the show where two media insiders break down broken news. My name is Fran. I am one of those media insiders, and my co-host, as always, is Antoinette Lattouf. Hello.
Hi, I am Antoinette Lattouf. I am Antoinette Lattouf having a identity crisis. Well, the latest identity crisis.
What is it now?
Well, we used to be journos, and I'm still trying to figure out week to week if I am a journalist or not. But this week I have done quite a bit of journalisming. That is a verb. But I have an exclusive to share with our dear listeners, which is quite journalism adjacent.
Well, it is. It does sound like journalism. So maybe this week you are a journalist.
I think this week I am, but there will be more on that soon. What exactly that exclusive is, very exciting. But a quick thank you to you, Jan, for holding down the fort while I was away last week. I really did love that chat with former BBC journalist Karishma Patel.
Yes, I did an interview with Karishma last week for those listening, and some people were, because we do have some listener feedback. Someone says, I do love your joint analysis of the news, but it's important to hear from Karishma Patel. Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. Walt/Waltette said a bit abrupt, kind of a jerk away from the last few episodes. Still listening. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that feedback.
Yeah,
we actually didn't signpost to our audience that was going to happen. It sort of just happened. And when it happened, I thought, maybe we should have let people know that that's what was going to happen. But it might happen more and more. I'm just letting you know now.
We are toying with the idea of a they used to be journos kind of subset of interviews of other people who have either left the industry or are doing something different.
Or are having an identity crisis a la Antoinette Lattouf. Yeah.
One of our listeners, Liberati, she has called herself Liberati.
Okay.
She noted how positive and upbeat, Jan, that you sounded and that you used words of affirmation at the end towards Karishma when you said that you are not a shithead. And not only that, she also worried about how that might make me feel, saying, I can't wait to hear what Antoinette thinks about this. So she clearly worried about my welfare and my desire for words of affirmation, and a little bit territorial, which I don't mind. Thank you, Liberati.
Thank you, Liberati. Thank you to all the people who are watching the interviews right through to the very end, because that indeed did happen right at the very end as I was sort of thanking Karishma. And what a testament to me that the greatest compliment I can give someone is, you are not a shithead.
Well, I also think that's a testament to you. People are checking in on my welfare because we had a clinical psychologist send a message saying, I feel it is my duty as a clinical psychologist to give Antoinette words of affirmation because Jan struggles to do so. We love you, Jan. It's not your fault, but we all need encouragement sometimes. So she goes on to continue, Antoinette, you are amazing, intelligent and kind and doing wonderful things for the world. You'll get it wrong sometimes, but that is good. We know being good enough is good enough, and you, my friend, at that. And so is Jan, etc., etc. And I just will gloss over the part where she says, but she felt so compelled to reach out.
Is this a real person?
This is a real person who is a clinical, would you think I made her up? This is a real person who sent us a message on our @media Instagram account who is a clinical psychologist.
Okay, well, thank you to all of the mental health professionals out there who have our backs, and also putting some of us in our place. I will try to be a little bit more affirmative to Antoinette. Mm-hmm. Antoinette, you are not a shithead.
Thank you so much.
How do you like that?
I feel great.
How'd I do?
It's doing wonders for my identity crisis.
You're not.
Thank you.
And you can feel proud of that. You heard it here first. All right, what is on the show today?
So I have some exclusive media tea on the closure of legacy literary journal Meanjin. So Melbourne University Press, which is the publisher, has said that it's no longer financially viable to keep it afloat. But a Meanjin editor calls bullshit, well, not so much in those words, but tells us the reason they believe it was shut down. I've also been in touch with a philanthropic organisation whose offer raises some serious questions about just how much shutting the journal down had to do with not having enough dollars. So if it's not the money, what is it? And so I got to say, I'm not particularly surprised by what it is, but that comes later in the show.
Mm-hmm. Or what the editors are suggesting that it might be anyway.
Yes.
Well, that's your no. My no from me is the reporting, or I suppose the lack thereof.
Yeah.
Lack thereof reporting on the release of the Islamophobia envoys report, which happened last week. But actually the no is probably, it's a little bit of a deviation this week actually. It's not so much about the reporting or the no reporting, but rather sort of the envoy itself, the envoys themselves, and some of the qualms that I have with that in general. So we're going to unpack that.
So it's a 2-pronged, 3-pronged no.
7, 8 prongs. Yeah. There could be more prongs, but we simply don't have time. But we're gonna unpack the prongs a little bit later.
Then our big chat in the second half of the show is the shooting of Charlie Kirk, how that has been covered incessantly in the press, wall-to-wall coverage, saturated, hard to miss it. But it is also happening against the backdrop of far-right rallies in the UK, and we want to interrogate how you responsibly report on the far right, on growing fascism. We have plenty of examples, and we could do this week in, week out of don't do this, this ain't it, this is crap. But we have consulted some experts on how best to cover it, because that also needed to inform how we do it, because there was a bit of confusion between you and I going, should we do this? Should we show that? Do we amplify this? Are we just doing the same as everybody else? Anyway, we will get to that because we are learning as we go.
I mean, we're navigating all of this stuff ourselves, really. Yeah. And if there is a piece of feedback, because we love feedback here on We Used to Be Journos, if there's a piece of feedback that I can give us, it's that we tend to talk a lot about what not to do. And I think sometimes we could stand to talk a little bit more about actually what do you do? What should you do? What is best practice? So that's
fair.
That's coming up a little bit later. Plus, sort of a little bit about how we're kind of feeling this week and what some of the reporting is, I think, obscuring or distracting us from.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm not distracted from it. I'm right there. I'm right there. So we're gonna unpack that a little bit later too.
And then, of course, we finish off with it's a yes from me. It was a bit more challenging for me this week. Usually I'm okay at pointing something out. But I do give a nod to a news outlet that for me still keeps its eye on what I think is the biggest political and human rights global story and doesn't get distracted by populist politics. That's later in the show.
And there's a piece on the ABC actually that I thought was quite thought-provoking and didn't really know too much about, talking about drops in the Canberra Press Gallery. And we're going to explain what drops are. We're going to explain why they're a little bit probo and why I thought this piece was pretty good, because it had that constructive element of like, rather than what not to do, what to do.
Constructive journalism.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the yes at the end of the show. But without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with the bad. Let's start with the no's.
Hey, Antoinette here. Just quickly before we get on with the show, I have a huge favour to ask. Maybe like 1.5 favours. If you enjoy watching us on YouTube, please just take a moment to hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and maybe even share it with a friend you think will like this episode. We want to keep growing our online community, our online Etterati here on YouTube, and you can help do that. Simply hit subscribe, tell us what you think, leave a comment, and share with one friend. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
So my note from me this week, a few days ago, the Islamophobia envoy released his report on Islamophobia in Australia. And there are a few things about this that are a little bit of a no.
Well, I was traveling last Friday, so I missed it entirely. And it wasn't until you were like, hey, did you know that this happened? And then I was like, no. And my next question was the Prime Minister there? Because to be honest, I didn't expect the Prime Minister to be standing there at the press conference with Aftab Malik. We've never seen them photographed together before.
Oh.
And so when the anti-Semitism envoy came in the big press conference, I knew that when he launched the anti-Semitism envoy, there was a big song and dance. And then the Islamophobia envoy was like an afterthought, like months later until somebody was appointed. And so I was just like, oh, the PM was there.
No, I expected the PM to be there. I think it would have been highly conspicuous if he had launched the anti-Semitism report, but not the Islamophobia report, given he had created the binary between the two.
Well, when he launched, then how do you speak to the fact that when he launched it, he had a press conference with Siegel and not with Malik? So anyway, that was my anticipation.
Fair enough, didn't know that.
And then just generally, I don't like these envoys. I think it's bullshit politicking. I think it's a distraction, but that is not what we're here to talk about.
That is definitely what we're here to talk about, and we will talk about that. But let me me just say that you're not. I'm not surprised that you didn't hear about it because it was the story. The press conference happened on a Friday. And any journalist slash political staffer will tell you that the only reason you release a story on a Friday is if you don't want people to know about it.
Yeah.
Because Friday is a slow day, baby. Like Friday night, the journalists are winding down. Everyone's at the pub. Readers and listeners they don't want any
tired.
big news.
This is when you do the story about a panda birth at the zoo. It's why we made a decision not to release our podcast on a Friday.
Yeah, well, like who's going to want to listen to like a
heavy.
recap of the week and the news on a Friday? No one.
Yeah.
And also a lot of newsrooms have weekday and weekend teams. So it kind of it falls in this it can tend to fall between the cracks sometimes if you release something on a Friday night and the weekend team comes in and they don't pick it up in the way that the weekday team normally would or whatever. Anyway.
When was the anti-Semitism report released?
So that was released on a Thursday.
Okay, that's better. That's not brilliant, but that is better. Better than a Friday. Much
That's
better.
definitely better than Friday.
Yeah.
And you know that got quite a bit of coverage because it was wild.
It was batshit crazy. Well, it made some batshit crazy recommendations, including sweeping powers to defund unis and more powers to monitor the media. I say batshit crazy. Some of the recommendations.
Yeah. It was intense. And it copped a lot of criticism, and I think fairly so. And so I'm not surprised if people don't really know what this report contained. It didn't really contain defunding universities or media monitoring, but it did have 54 recommendations, which did include things like revising the terror laws, also upping funding for research on Islamophobia, and just things like very unsexy things such as capacity building.
Oh, I love.
Do you know what I mean?
I
So
love
when you read capacity building in a report, like if you're a journalist, immediately the eyes glaze over. Like, what am I?
Capacity for what?
What are we talking about?
Look, I know I'm going to have another whinge. Am I allowed to insert whinge here?
Please.
Okay. The reason I hate...
I'm going to just start putting that in the script from now on. Just like,
insert whinge. Antoinette, go.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to tell you to not whinge, but can I at least just scaffold the whinging within correct parameters? Insert whinge.
Okay, insert whinge. Okay, the whole reason I have a problem with this harmony daying, social cohesioning, let's hold hands approach to a genocide is that it creates this false binary that you are either anti-Semitic or you are... Islamophobic, and that these are the two responses to the human rights atrocities we're seeing unfold. I don't want to diminish for a second the fact that anti-Semitism was already increasing, notably by the far right. Islamophobia has always had an undercurrent, an ugly undercurrent in this country. But I just think social cohesioning, you can't social cohesion your way out of international law and human rights obligations. And that's what it seems like the government's like, we're going to crack down on anti-Semitism, we're going to crack down on Islamophobia. But then I pull myself up and I go, well, you know what? I'm neither Muslim or Jewish, so maybe my opinion in this doesn't matter that much.
Yes. Well, I mean, on that last point, I would say, like, if you're not Muslim or Jewish, like, your opinion probably doesn't matter as much, to be fair. I'd prefer to hear from Muslims on Islamophobia and Jewish people on anti-Semitism, frankly. I guess one of the reasons why I just had alarm bells ringing about the envoys is because sometimes I think, and particularly with Islamophobia, I think it can tend to obscure other forms of racism because the other forms of racism tend to get absorbed by an Islamophobia umbrella, and not in a malicious way, sometimes in like a pragmatic way. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So last year, my mum is walking around the neighbourhood, right? She's strolling my niece in the Prime Minister's electorate, no less, and she comes across this real estate sign with a for sale sign, and the real estate sign had been graffitied. And the graffiti said, fuck Palestine, fuck Gaza, and fuck Lebos too.
Oi, what have we got to do with it?
So just great stuff there. Clearly a connection being made by, the artiste about Gaza, about connecting Gaza with the Lebanese community here in Australia. Like Lebos is a very particular archetype, right? Now, my mum's Lebanese. She was very upset by this sign. So she took a photo and she sent it to us, and she said in the, the family group chat was going off that day.
Yeah.
But she's like, do I send this to the police? And I said, well, I don't know what the police are going to do about it, to be honest. And in the end, we ended up sending it to the Islamophobia register because that just seemed like the closest place that made sense to send that to. But it's not technically Islamophobic.
No, it's not. But I have a funny, not so funny story. You remember that guy that, one of the many men that was threatening me, and I went to the authorities and had him arrested and convicted. My first port of call, because his horrible threats to me were so racist, and I wouldn't say overtly Islamophobic, but like they definitely had sprinkles of Islamophobia with the violent threats. I first reported that to the Islamophobia Register. I also reported it to the E-Safety Commissioner. I heard back from the Islamophobia Register. They called me, they triaged it, and they were like, okay, we think it meets this criteria. Would you like us to pass it on to New South Wales Police? They did. I forgot about it. 3 months later, I get a call from New South Wales Police. Hey, Antoinette, we want to investigate this. We think we found the guy. So me, Lebanese Christian, gets a guy prosecuted via the Islamophobia Register.
Right.
Which like highlights the absurdity of this kind of binary, this false binary.
Yeah, and just the inadequacy of putting everything under the umbrella of Islamophobia when actually there's far more specific things going on. And if you absorb them, then you sort of erase them. And if you erase them, then you can't really understand why they're happening, and they sort of will just keep happening. So you can't really tackle them. And the last point that I wanted to make is, like, to his credit, the Aftab Malik was very clear that there is a distinction actually between Islamophobia and these other forms of racism, which are anti-Arab racism or anti-Palestinian racism. Like, he was very, very clear to make that distinction. And I just want to play you a little bit of what he said.
Mr. Malik says anti-Palestinian racism has driven Islamophobia as war rages in Gaza, but was careful not to conflate them.
The two are quite distinct, where there are intersections between the two. Islamophobia encompasses Muslims of all ethnicities. Anti-Palestinian racism is focused on Palestinians. There is a connection, but they are two separate phenomena.
Yeah, and it's true. And look, Aftab is a South Asian Muslim raised in the UK. The brand of racism that's very specific and homegrown to Australia, I dare say, is different to how South Asian Muslims experience racism in the UK. If the government was really cared about anti-Arab or Islamophobic or whatever racism, I mean, we probably need the politicians and media to stop dehumanizing Arabs and their actions showing that Arab lives don't matter, that Palestinian lives don't matter. They can have as many Islamophobia envoys and reports and whatever and press conferences as they like, but as long as they continue their dehumanizing language and their inaction and their policies, which continually tell us that these lives do not matter, they are worthless, that is what sticks.
She doesn't like the envoys, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
don't like the envoys.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Well, you've made a fair point.
Yeah.
And that is my no from me, and also clearly a no from you.
That is a no from me. So my no goes to Melbourne University Press and its closure of literary journal Meanjin, because something smells fishy. It doesn't quite add up.
I'm sure there are people listening right now who are saying, what is Meanjin? I've
Yes.
never heard of this literary journal, and that's okay. But I think it's relevant, even if you're somebody that has never read it or doesn't know what we're talking about, because it's a real kind of cultural centerpiece. So
Yes.
it started in 1940. And really with a remit to publish Australian writers about Australian life, you know, as a way of kind of understanding who we are as a country, almost like a nation building exercise.
Yeah, it's one of our longest running literary journals. Even if literary journals aren't your thing, it plays an important role in our arts and literature scene. A couple of weeks ago, seemingly out of nowhere, we learn that Meanjin is getting axed. Its final issue will be December 2025. It is a quarterly literary journal. So earlier this month, Melbourne University Press, which publishes it, which is part of Melbourne University, they said the decision, which actually shocked the editors who've since been made redundant, was, and this is to quote them, purely on financial grounds. And then immediately lots of contributors and writers came out condemning the move and taking aim at this argument. Like, was it really about the money? Award-winning writer Anna Crean told The Conversation, the public statement that this turn of events is a financial decision is laughable. I highly doubt Meanjin in its entire 85 years has ever made money.
It's a literary journal. Who goes into literary journal publishing to make dollars? Like, that's just, it's so insane. Straight
It's
off
hilarious.
the bat, it's like,
yeah, that's why I started sniffing around.
Them's the alarm bells.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, like, Melbourne Uni raked in $3.2 billion in revenue last year. Okay, 74.6 million spent on travel and staff development. 74.6
Are you
million.
sure? Really?
Girl,
Are these
this was
from
in
the annual report?
100% their annual report last
Holy
year. It had
moly.
it. Go look at it. Go look
And
at
their staffing costs are 2 part-time editors and then paying contributors.
So
So like big financial cuts made there.
Yeah. What's happening?
Okay. So I wanted to take a dive into the dollars, and that formed part of this investigation. And because as with those numbers, like the $3.2 billion in revenue, the math's just not mathing. 2 part-time editors have been made redundant. One has spoken to us, and that's the deputy editor, Eli McLean. He has said to me that he doesn't think it's about the money at all, that there's another reason for it, and it has to do with something that we are all familiar with. So this is what he has told us specifically and exclusively. The university has a proven track record of crushing pro-Palestine activism on its campuses wherever it can. I can't imagine they would have taken kindly to Meanjin, technically a University of Melbourne publication, pushing such a bold and uncompromising position for Palestine against Zionism, positions that I and the rest of the masthead unequivocally stand by.
Huh. So the too long didn't read version, even though we did actually read the whole version, is it wasn't money issues. They didn't like what we were saying about Gaza.
Eli also said that he'd been told from an MUP colleague that the chair of the MUP board, Warren Bebbington, was taking issue with what had been published in Meanjin over the past 18 months.
Okay.
And I wanted any sort of confirmation or clarity. Is that true? What specifically did Warren Bebbington allegedly have
issue with?
What did he have issue with? So I contacted Warren Bebbington, MUP, and Melbourne University with a series of questions highlighting these allegations. And I followed up a second time. I followed up a third time. I called. And all I received after all of that was, MUP has received your email.
Okay.
So they didn't answer anything, which for those listening, they go, oh, maybe that's normal behavior. Never in my career, my very long career, have I had to reach out to a university that many times, leave voice messages, hey, follow up, gave lots of leeway for the only thing to come through is that we have received it. Not even a generic comment, not a we are looking into this, not a this, nothing, not reiterating its initial position that this was a financial decision, just, and I thought, well, maybe it's because we're a small media outlet. I don't know. But
Okay.
I've never had this happen in my career before.
All right. Well, that just seems like one sort of slightly loose end that hasn't been tied up neatly. But the question of the money and the fact that it wasn't, no longer financially viable and that this was a financial decision, what happened there?
Okay, so
Because that's the bit that I'm like, no, I don't believe you.
I don't either. Because I can reveal that the Melbourne University Press has been approached by the Roderick Centre for Australian Literature and Creative Writing, which is part of James Cook University in Queensland. And I have a statement from them that the Roderick Centre for Australian Literature and Creative Writing is well equipped to take on caretaker responsibilities should MUP wish to see the journal continue. They have made a financial offer.
Right.
I can also reveal that the Foundation for Australian Literary Studies met earlier this week to try and, quote, put pressure on University of Melbourne and MUP to keep the journal running, but at the moment, my understanding that it is not for sale. And well, not for sale are the exact words used in a statement that MUP gave to The Guardian. So which one is it? Is it that it's not financially viable because you have philanthropic and literary organisations saying, hey, we want to keep Meanjin afloat? Then they come out and say, well, but we're not selling it. So is it in financial trouble? Are you not selling it? Or do you wish to see it die?
Ah.
I put those questions to Melbourne University Press.
And what did they say?
Well, they said nothing. They ignored me. But it just doesn't add up because now we have the deputy editor telling us that they believe it was because of their unequivocal coverage and condemnation of Israel's actions. We have that editor also saying that they had been warned by a Melbourne University of Press staffer that the chair of the board wasn't happy with what they were publishing for 18 months. We have an organisation saying that they have made an offer to keep Meanjin afloat. Then we have Meanjin saying we are not for sale. So the math ain't mathing. Is it not for sale? Is it broke? Do you want it to sink? Like, it feels as though Melbourne University Press would rather see one of Australia's longest running literary journals
Just die.
However, I can reveal there is more to this, Jan.
God, what?
Kate Larson, an arts consultant, was engaged earlier this year to do a sustainability review of Meanjin. Nothing in her scope, she has shared on Instagram, and I have since spoken to her and she's confirmed this. Nothing in the scope of her review was she asked to, hey, Kate, can you look at like how we can wind this organisation up? No, nothing in the scope or in her findings suggested that it needed to shut.
So we have one of Australia's like premier literary journals shutting out of nowhere, the editors saying that it's because of their coverage on Gaza, the university saying, no, it's a financial decision, philanthropists coming in and saying, hey, we've got money, we'll save the day, the university saying, actually, no, it's not for sale.
And then when I go and put a series of very comprehensive questions, and to our subscribers, you'll be able to have a look at exactly what was sent, including the statement from Kate Larson, who was the person who undertook the sustainability review.
You get a response of, dum, dum, dum.
Nothing.
Great. Yeah, good stuff.
It's a disappointing, it's a sad no from me.
It's a sad no from you. Okay, that's fair. That is absolutely fair. All right, well, it has been a big week for the far right. Fucking hell. Oh, God. No, it's not great.
No, it's
bad. We had our Nazi-led protests here a fortnight ago.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk was shot dead last week in the United States. There's been massive rallies in London on the weekend. 110,000 people, apparently by some estimates, showed up. So in this chat, we're going to examine, I think, the media and the way it's scrambling a little bit to cover the far right, including ourselves.
Yeah,
we're just thinking, how do we, what do we do here?
Yeah.
The role of the right-wing media, that ecosystem, and what I think is a slightly more relevant angle, which is to look at the kind of the rest of the media and where it sits in the sensible centre.
I hate that sensible centre.
Oh, my God.
It's not been very sensible lately. It feels a bit more like the scared centre,
Yeah.
but
It's
we'll
also
unpack that.
Not feeling very centre
No,
either,
no.
you know, which is a real concern. It's a real misnomer, that term, sensible centre.
We're also going to look at what the experts say is the right way to cover the far right, because it's one thing to be like, that sucks, don't do that, and be all judgy, but you're going to get practical takeaways. Not only you, we got practical takeaways.
Yes.
And we got pulled up on a couple of things that we did ourselves.
We got scolded.
We did.
By an expert.
But if we're going to dish it, we have to be able to take it as well.
Yep.
We're also going to talk about how we feel wading through all of this coverage and these events. And I guess feeling like the unfolding genocide is even more buried as like under story 4,376 on a news homepage, whereas stories on Kirk and his wife's hands and Kirk's Instagram following and Kirk like are just dominating everywhere, every organisation across the spectrum and across the globe. Jan, there was so much, like, I'll say, interesting terminology used to describe Charlie Kirk. Like, how would you describe him?
I would describe him as a far-right racist extremist who cosplays as a middle-of-the-road conservative in order to spread a very dangerous message that is outwardly detrimental, primarily to minorities, but also to just democracy at large.
Oh, okay. Well,
is generally how I would describe him.
Well, Sydney Morning Herald described him as a conservative activist, ABC News, US commentator or right-wing activist. SBS called him a right-wing influencer and US conservative activist. 7 News called him a right-wing political commentator.
Right-wing political commentator.
And The Guardian editorial described him as a hugely influential activist.
Just a hugely influential activist. What does that mean?
I mean,
that could be you.
I mean, it could be somebody selling teeth whitening online. When I read all of these euphemisms, I was like, what? And I guess to highlight the responsibility of the media and the impact it can have, like just hours after the shooting, even when the suspect was still at large, there were these headlines and speculations about violence on the left. Even before we knew who the shooter was, even comparisons with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And like that guy was a registered Republican. And before I play some videos, because we have learned a little bit from a far-right expert, which we're going to get to in a moment, I'm going to do something which is called prebunking. And prebunking is where you, I guess, interrogate the facts and you analyze it before you just allow someone like Elon Musk or Donald Trump to spew like rubbish. Because what the research shows is that you and I can debunk. So after something has been said, you know how we pull apart our headlines and whatever, and we can do that. But quite often, the message has already stuck. The mud has stuck, and it's really hard to undo. It's so hard to undo, even if it's clearly nonsense and clearly easily refutable with facts. And so there was a good article in The Economist, which essentially did this prebunking. Firstly, it acknowledged that there is no single definition of political violence and no federal database. So when people say this is a result of left-wing violence is out of control, left-wing violence, blah, 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 which a lot of populist outlets started to do. Firstly, it acknowledged, look, it's actually hard to ascertain what it is. However, from the research that we have, there were two bodies of research, one from the University of Cincinnati that show that right-leaning attacks are more frequent. Another research from the State University of New York studied political violence between 1990 and 2020 over a 30-year period. Violent acts on the right were far more frequent and deadly than attacks on the left. So that is what the facts are. It is well documented, but that did not stop. I'm going to play you like a little montage. That did not stop Donald Trump, did not stop Elon Musk, and then did not stop Sky News from them being, assembling a montage of people who were just like random students when they were asked to react about Kirk's death, coming to the very inaccurate and early conclusion that this was a result of violence on the left. Okay,
so now this could be an interesting thought experiment for people listening. Like, now you know that it's bullshit.
It's absolute bullshit.
Just have a think about like what your brain does when you hear the following.
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious and they're horrible.
And then you see how much violence there's on the left, with our friend Charlie Kirk getting murdered in cold blood this week, and people on the left celebrating it openly. The left is the party of murder.
To see some of this reaction online, leftists celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk got shot and killed. How do you feel?
Happy. Goodbye.
See that Charlie Kirk just got shot and killed?
That's good. Girl, someone had to do it. He was a disgusting person with disgusting beliefs.
Yeah, he's a I'm like, yeah, he's an you know?
He's you got what you deserve. I'm sorry. You're a bad person. Bad things happen to bad people. Celebrate it. It should happen more often. Not death necessarily, but like karma, big fan of it.
Extraordinary stuff. It fills me with despair.
So after you know the evidence, but then you hear Trump and then you hear Elon Musk, and then clearly Chris Kenny was like, well, here is evidence. Here is a montage that we collated off the internet. Like, what on earth is that? But I've seen it time and time again, this suggestion, this is about left-wing violence. And the suspect had not been even found.
I mean,
we don't even know much about the suspect right now, other than he's a white Mormon from Utah. He seems to come from a nuclear regular family. Seems very ordinary, and his family are Republicans.
But there's another point to, seeing Trump, seeing Elon Musk, seeing Chris Kenny and Sky. It's just this very clear example of how interconnected this media ecosystem is, that actually the propaganda of a demagogue, an autocrat like Trump, and I think it's fair to call him that.
Yeah.
The way in which that type of propaganda can just get disseminated just like at the drop of a hat right around the world.
Yeah. And that's why we need the press, the sensible centre, which is now the scared centre or not centre at all, whatever you want to call it, has an even more important job to push back and interrogate it. Well, to be fair, The Economist did a reasonable job, even though their headline, rather than, absolutely debunking it, the headline was, is radical left violence really on the rise in America? So it's still I felt like it was
it's still feeding in to what they want you to be talking about.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
it doesn't get 5 stars.
No, once you get into the body of the article, but the headline and even the subheading, the killing of Charlie Kirk is part of a grim pattern of political violence. This is what the data shows. So it's still kind of toying with the idea that this is left-wing violence, even though the data categorically denounces
it.
And
and so in a way, it kind of feels like we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic when we do debunking and also pre-bunking, frankly, because the bigger issue is the fact that we do have this, so-called sensible centre, I'm doing air quotes, that while they certainly don't talk about the left being the party of murder, they do play this role in valorising Charlie Kirk, in legitimising him. I'll give you an example, and I'm just going to go straight to like the epitome of the sensible centre, which is the New York Times. Obviously, it's an American story. But if you listen to The Daily, which is the podcast that they put out every day about whatever big event happened, the one that they did directly the day of Charlie Kirk's shooting or the day after, the reporter in that piece said that it had occurred to him that Charlie Kirk was, and I quote, killed in the line of duty.
Jesus Christ, what duty was that?
This was the reporter saying that it was a thought that he had. It wasn't that he was quoting someone. It was his thought that he thought he would share on the Daily podcast, which is listened to by how many millions of people around the world, that this man died in the line of duty as though he was some kind of, returned war hero.
Yeah, right.
And everybody knows by now the piece that was written by Ezra Klein. I don't know how his brain just like fused in on itself when he wrote that.
Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way. And there's a very nice black and white image of him looking pensive while holding a mic on stage, about to have this kind of nuanced, really important conversation.
And within the piece, Ezra Klein writes, a taste for disagreement is a virtue in a democracy. So just reducing essentially the hate speech. Like there's shit that man has said about black people, about immigrants, about trans people that
about
doesn't
women,
bear repeating. You can't even repeat it. Being identified as just like, hey, it's a little taste for disagreement.
Yeah.
And he says that liberalism, whatever that is these days, could use a little bit more of Kirk's moxie. Just add a bit of moxie and fearlessness. So like my question is like, who is going to push back against the far right media that is a mouthpiece for an autocrat like Trump when you have the biggest newspaper in the United States?
One of the most respected newspapers.
Essentially in their primary opinion piece, like their star columnist writing that.
Okay, and at the one hand, and I always say, like, we should not be talking about Sky News, we should not be talking about The Australian, but the reason we talk about this is because when the rest of the media isn't pushing back or being more critical, then there isn't an enormous amount of difference. They maybe just soften the language or a little bit more polite, but essentially land the same message. And the similar thing happened with the UK rallies. I looked around at the headlines and the coverage of the rallies in the UK. And so these rallies were far right. These rallies had, again, hateful ideology. News.com.au says, a cultural revolution has begun. In inverted commas, UK erupts. That to me sounds like it's kind of galvanizing or really, cultural revolution.
There's a valor to it, isn't there?
There's something noble to it. And again, you can say, well, that's news.com.au. Whatever. But then the BBC says, this is its headline, police hurt during Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom rally in London. Now, Unite the Kingdom is not in inverted commas. Unite the Kingdom being put in the headline. Again, it legitimizes the Unite the Kingdom. These people don't want to unite. They want people deported. They want people harmed. They're not uniting anyone. So the BBC adopting their language. I'm like, is there a huge amount of discrepancy between the BBC, the most trusted news source in the world, and a Murdoch rag down under? In contrast, a little bit better, but I had to really dig for these examples. Al Jazeera says clashes in London as 110,000 join far-right rally against immigration. I'm like, that seems more factual
and
less favourable.
And less euphemistic, less watered down.
And CNN, far-right anti-immigration protests in London lead to clashes with police. CNN and Al Jazeera did a better job not having a congratulatory tone towards those on the far right.
What blows my mind is how easy it is to find how to not report on the far right. Like, if you simply went to google.com and put in Google how to not report on the far right, I promise you, you will get a slew of very useful reports and information from a variety of far right experts and academics and scholars who have devoted their life essentially to telling people how not to report on the far right. So it's super easy to do. The big one, in my 24 hours of research that I did, can I just tell you the big one, which I think we have quite a problem coming to terms with, which is that these people want notoriety. For the love of God, do everything you possibly can to not give it to them. Do not provide disproportionate coverage. Do not have...
Do you mean the 9 News article updating people on Charles Kirk's Instagram follow account should not have been written?
Probably not. It just could have not been written. That could have been a choice. And I did actually speak to a far right expert, a guy called Dr. Jordan McSweeney, who's from the University of Canberra. We actually had quite a good conversation. And I was like, listen, my brain operates on like a BuzzFeed listicle level these days because it's so worn out by the internet. Like, give me just the top 3, like what is a never, never, never do, right? And he was like, okay, never, never, never do is don't link to any of their socials. Fair. I don't think a lot of news outlets do that. Some do.
Yes.
Some have.
We did point out in an earlier episode that the anti-immigration rallies here, the Daily Telegraph, not only linked 3 times, but then we did too. Republished the flyer for those protesters, remember?
So point number 2 is do not republish any of their material.
Oh, that's what we did.
We did do that. We did. We republished it to tell people not to republish it. It's bad.
Did you explain to him that this expert that we were doing it with a critical lens and so it's a bit better?
Very much I did explain to him. He said no.
Oh no.
And point number 3 that he had was do not use euphemizing or legitimate language or legitimizing language to describe these.
Like a hugely influential influencer.
Yes. For example, this kind of like vague, wishy-washy language. Certainly don't call neo-Nazis right-wing activists. They're neo-Nazis. Just call them neo-Nazis, right? So like that is just so rife in the media to be able to do that. And I did speak to him about, I kind of wanted absolution. I was like, but we are the good ones. Because remember, we were debating whether or not we play Thomas Sewell speaking on the steps of Parliament House in Melbourne, and we did play it in our episode on the Nazi-led rallies, and we put it in the context of like, yo, everyone, there's a fucking Nazi on the steps of Parliament House. Like, this is no good, right? We did put it in that context, and I explained that to Jordan on the phone, and I was like, and what do you reckon? And he was like, no.
Oh, okay.
Do not do that.
So you're just saying we're not that far removed from Chris Kenny on Sky News. I'm just saying.
You're saying. I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. But this is another never, never. Do not ever, ever, ever quote the far right or neo-Nazis verbatim. Do not play their grabs. Do not interview them. If you're going to try and report what it is that they said, always paraphrase. Journalists have a tendency to be like, well, we need to interview them to understand them, and we need to hold them to account, and we need to make sure that we air this odious blah, 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 blah. And actually what the experts say is like these adversarial types of interviews actually tend to backfire because they end up just being this space where they get to espouse whatever it is that they want. And if they look like fools, they can just turn around and say, well, that's the left-wing bias of the ABC coming
and
through.
They've set us up, and they've
set us up and actually play the victim, and then that emboldens their following and puts them in good stead. So it's like we just have to be really, really careful. Therefore, I was like, right, okay, there's a bunch of what not to do. So is there what should we be doing?
Okay. Yes.
And look, I think he gave a really good answer. And I think he took the listicle pretty seriously.
Oh, I love that.
So I was like, give me three, Dr. Jordan. 3, what should media outlets do to cover the far right? And here they are.
Focusing on the stories that the far right doesn't want told, such as their legal troubles and credible threats or acts of violence. ensuring proper contextualization and accurate descriptions to avoid hyping the far right. So, for example, the COVID anti-lockdown protests had far-right participation, but I don't think they could be described as far-right protests, as some media did. And this slippage was seized on by some far-right groups to make their groups seem larger and more influential than they actually are. And, of course, ensuring the safety of journalists and sources, given the history of some far-right actors threatening perceived opponents. So journalists reporting on the far right should consider locking down their social media, and newsrooms really need plans in place to deal with threats and doxing, as well as ensuring that there is adequate mental health support for their journalists and, if needed, adequate security.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, look, and I do know a few friends of mine have who work in various newsrooms have said in the lead up to the, again, air quotes, anti-immigration far-right rallies, that they didn't want to attend those rallies, that they went in place of other colleagues who weren't feeling safe to attend. So there is a definite fear. And I would dare say that going to a rally where there's lots of cameras is the safer end of town in terms of covering the far right. I think it's once you start poking around their financial or legal troubles or the impacts they're having on people that I think you get in difficult, difficult and dangerous territory. And I know that there are some news influencers or media influencers or whatever you want to call them who are currently facing a horrible amount of death threats and trolling, not because they've been investigating the far right, just because they haven't appropriately mourned Charlie Kirk's death.
This is the guy who started a thing called the Professor Watch List in 2016, which was a running list of professors and academics and scholars that were essentially teaching things that he and his group, Turning Points USA, just did not like. Let me just give you one example of one professor. God knows how many academics are on this list. This is just one of them. Here's what he ended up on the list for. His name is Sean Swaller.
Articles published on the Turning Point USA website criticize Schwaller's teachings, stating he allegedly teaches students that the supporters of President Donald Trump are part of a white patriarchal America. Schwaller told me most of what Turning Point leaders say about him is false.
I fear that this is the start of some kind of new wave of political violence on college campuses, and that folks, for instance, on the professor watch list could be targeted.
Is that the professor talking?
That's the professor talking.
Because he said a white patriarchal...
Because he's teaching that followers of Donald Trump follow a white patriarchal style of American politics.
Which they do unashamedly. Like Kirk says to women, return to your husbands, or succumb to your husbands.
Antoinette, don't try to make this make sense. It does not make sense. But what I'm saying is that this is something that was started and perpetuated by Charlie Kirk, like a feeling of fear and a feeling of paranoia and a feeling that you can't be open with academic freedom and professors getting doxxed and having to move offices and doing all of this, kind of contortions to maintain their safety. And of course, a lot of them are black professors, a lot of them are trans professors, just teaching shit that he doesn't like. And so just to go back to Ezra Klein, characterizing Charlie Kirk's, life and modus operandi as just disagreements are good within society. Like, it's just an utter mischaracterization and has absolutely no taking into account of the people that are really impacted by what he has done and said this past decade.
Yeah. I think in addition to the absolute saturation of coverage and the non-critical coverage and the coverage in the so-called centre that didn't appear all that different from the right, for me was this overwhelming sense of sadness at just how much attention was given to one life.
Yeah.
And how much, what about his children and what about his wife? Valid points. When we have seen so many children and wives and families, I just felt like, is this for real? Is this for real? And I just know with more journalists being killed in Gaza, less images are coming out of Gaza, and they're ramping up their attacks and their whole we should value people's lives. And if you're not crying enough over Charlie Kirk, then what are you? I'm I'm still crying over the hundreds of thousands. I'm still crying over Hind Rajab. I'm still crying over journalist Anas al-Sharif. I'm still, I
found it impossible.
I struggled. And I thought, am I doing whataboutism? When you go, well, this is sad, violence is sad, and political violence is bad? Am I doing whataboutism by going, well, what about this? And why aren't we covering this?
Man, it's like I found it impossible to mourn him. I mean, not because of, all of the horrible shit that he said and his kind of like very nauseating presence and racist views and whatever. That aside, it was almost impossible because like to mourn someone in this time for me necessitates like a kind of a departure from a reality where grief is the exception.
Yeah, yeah.
And like grief is not the exception here. Like grief is the rule. How do you mourn someone when you're just like in a perpetual state of mourning? Like it becomes a different state entirely. Like I haven't stopped going to a funeral in 2 years.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like, if you were going to mourn every single dead child in Gaza, I'm going to lose my fucking shit now, so I don't want to do that. I actually don't want to do that.
Okay.
How many years would it take you
Yeah.
to mourn every dead kid? That's not even every dead person.
There are not enough days or hours
You know
if
what
you
I'm
were to try and
saying?
attend
So
every funeral. There are not enough.
There's not enough. And so, like, the idea of having to mourn a man that, like, aided, abetted, cheered this on, it's like I can't. My fucking mind is a graveyard. Like there's no room, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
so I don't. Maybe that's just obviously that's me. I'm in a particular like state.
No, but I'm there too. And as part of my travels last week, I was in regional New South Wales, and I was meant to give a talk. Well, I did. Not just meant to. I gave a talk to high school students about journalism. And I'm in this state of like shock and numbness. And as I say, having a weekly existential crisis about whether I call myself a journalist. And I just thought, what am I going to tell these students? Like what kind of a you go get them, guys, dream big am I going to give them? And I have spoken on stages of, all over the world, all big and large, under so much more pressure. And I have never felt so paralyzed in terms of what my message is going to be, because I did not know what to tell a room full of 16 and 17-year-olds.
Run, dude.
I know. And the one thing, this one saving grace is, I wasn't feeling alone. This woman ran in from the street. So I'm in Albury in regional New South Wales, and runs in on the street. This is a very conservative, a conservative town. And then she just like mouths, like, as recognized me and said hello, and then waited in the car park for me to come afterwards to her. And she had rallied a few friends. She's like, we feel like we're going mad. Right. Our friends online are yelling at us because we're not adequately mourning Charlie Kirk's death. And I feel like what's happened to humanity, and why is this a grief Olympics, and why aren't we allowed to mourn what's happening to Palestinians without being called all of these? Anyway, she just like, I feel like so she gave me a hug, and I felt like there are souls around the world who are like, and I'm looking at this press coverage and I'm like, this is not making sense. This is not making sense. We're being just, she kept saying, this is a distraction. This is a distraction.
Yeah. I think it is. And I think like, we talked about like, why, I think you said it to me maybe Monday. Like, I'm feeling off this week.
Oh my God, so
like, I'm feeling off. I'm
feeling
off.
You're looking at me.
I'm feeling off too.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we just kind of know that this is just all a distraction from the genocide. Yeah. Which is it reaching a phase of like, they're just going to fucking exterminate people entirely, and we're here
talking about left-wing violence, which doesn't exist. Like with this wave of left-wing violence, which is just created and filling the airwaves.
And then the bastions of journalism, the stalwarts of journalism, the New York Times, are sitting here talking about how good and how moxie and fearlessness are good, and how disagreements actually are probably quite good for society. Like, what the fuck is going on?
And who wrote that BBC headline, Unite the Kingdom, as though that is a statement, not a rallying cry from neo-Nazis?
No more. The good stuff.
Yeah, okay. That's
the good stuff, please.
Thank
you.
Bad stuff.
Good. All right, here we go. Coming to the end of our show. I'm gonna pep up.
Okay.
It's a yes from me.
Okay, go.
It's a yes from me. All right. I read a piece in the on ABC Online actually, which I don't really peruse very often, but I did see it, and because I'm interested in the media and how it works, I thought, this could be an interesting thing to read. Mm-hmm. It was about it was written by a journalist called Gareth Hutchins, who I've seen his name pop up quite a bit lately.
Yeah, me too. He's been doing some good stuff.
All right.
Some good stuff.
He wrote, "The Federal Press Gallery is ceding power to the Albanese government." And what he was talking about was a thing called drops, which is when governments or politicians, members of parliament, will say to a journalist, because the press gallery is a it's a physical corridor. Okay, you walk
within
down
Parliament House.
Parliament House. So you walk down a corridor, and there's all of the media outlets on, the various sides of the corridor, right?
Yeah. They're all kind of sitting together.
Corridors,
but they're all kind of
They're
sitting together.
They're all kind of sitting together in the one, right? So it's this is a very interconnected ecosystem. But a drop is when a member of parliament will go to a particular journal at a particular outlet and say, "Hey, I have a story for you, and it's an exclusive story for you. It's embargoed until this time, and there's a caveat: you cannot quote any third party people." Yes, did you not know this?
No.
I'm gonna
is this like a common
dude? This is the most common thing. Actually, Media Watch, shout out once again. They do get shout outed quite a bit on this show. Media Watch. We should say something bad about them at some point.
No,
I'm sure
we have.
Oh, we have. Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good at balance. Yes, both sides. Yeah. But Media Watch actually did a really good story about drops. And
this week?
Well, it wasn't this week, it's last week. But this is building on that. And that you cannot have third-party quotes.
So you can't go to the opposition or to whatever or to an organisation and be like, well, actually...
No, ma'am.
But no journalist should ever agree to that.
Girl, not only do they agree, but it's like such common practice and it has been for years and decades, which is wild. Anyway.
Not by ABC, though, surely
everyone.
Not.
So this journalist, Gareth, was talking about a particular time when a drop landed in his lap at The Guardian, with, of course, the caveat, no third-party comment or whatever it was. And he was like, all right, cool, I can't have a third-party comment. Didn't really question that element of it. But he included a comment from Tim Costello from 6 months ago, talking about something similar.
So
Tim Costello is
new
the
third-party comment. That's how he interpreted it.
Yeah. I mean, he's the head of World Vision, was relevant for the story, which we don't need to go into. But he included a comment that was made several months ago, kind of got around the loophole. And apparently the political staffer who was in the office of a particular MP just called and just tore him a new asshole.
And then he'll never do that exclusive again.
Yeah. And you broke the third party code. You're a disgrace. That's not how it works. Yada yada. And he was like, I didn't even break the third party code. I just quoted someone from 6 months ago, providing context to this story. And so there's all sorts of intricacies with it, because if you break the code, then as you say, you won't get a story. If you do what Gareth did and quote someone from 6 months ago, you get someone in your ear tearing you a new asshole at 10:30 at whatever 8 p.m. at night while you're cooking dinner. Who wants that?
Right.
And so he was saying that there's things that should be done, which is just like editors, rather than the journalists making these
have
decisions.
This code of conduct where they don't all do it.
Correct. Have this code of conduct where you just say, you know what, just because this is how we've always done it, it doesn't mean this is how we should always do it. And say, we're not going to do that. And if our rivals, whatever media rivals, are going to do that, and we think that that's a bad vibe, we're just not going to emulate them. We are the news outfit that doesn't do that. So if you want to get your stories in our paper, well, you can't have this caveat of no third-party comment.
Watch this space. I don't think it's going to happen, but lovely and aspirational.
Yes, lovely and aspirational, but definitely something that's worth pondering. How much ground are we actually ceding to these?
We're not rubbing shoulders at the midwinter ball. We're agreeing to drops. This is, of course, this influences the coverage that comes out of Canberra. Yeah. Okay, it is a yes from me. Goes to Zeteo News. Mehdi Hassan, shout out to his news outfit. And I know you said that you do not want us to valorize, and I don't know, maybe the far-right expert will disagree with this listicle, because this article is just Charlie Kirk in his own words, and it is 17 quotes you should read from the right-wing activist and Trump ally who was tragically shot and killed on Wednesday in Utah. It's pretty much a compilation of vile things he says. And so it has subheadings: what he said about black women, what he said about feminism, what he said about Palestine, what he said about civil rights, what he's...
Why is this a yes from you?
Because I liked that they didn't spend time on him. They were just like, there's enough on the record about him. If you want to know who this bloke was, this is him in his own words. Now that I've...
Dr. Jordan McSweeney.
in trouble.
Dr. Jordan, if you're watching this, should we be reading out quotes of Charlie Kirk in his own words? But what if we say
he sucks, and this is gross. I'm not going to read them out, but I liked the fact that they just look, not only the listicle, which I think we're going to get in trouble from Dr. Jordan, but also because the rest of the website and even their YouTube and Substack offering, they had one segment called Full of Shit. And it talked about the left violence. Like it immediately debunked this. It didn't do what The Economist did, which was like, is violence on the left growing? It just went straight into that is full of shit, and it just debunked it, right?
Okay.
But
debunking we know doesn't work, but it's probably
pre-bunking and debunking. They can work in tandem, right?
Yep. Okay.
But also the rest, and this is the biggest thing for me, the rest of Zeteo News' page didn't take its eye off the biggest political story. Human rights, Gaza.
Right.
Like when you went to the homepages of SMH or everybody else, it was just wall to wall Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
And I
just checked yesterday, almost a week after.
It still is.
There's no Gaza.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm like, it did not take its eye. Of course, in the news cycle, newer things happen. Charlie Kirk needs to be covered, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, I like the listicle because it just shows who he is. They quickly debunked the full of shit about the left violence, and they kept Gaza prominent. So my yes goes to Zeteo News.
There you go. Zeteo News, zeteo.com.
Yep.
Sign up. Subscribe to their newsletter.
No, subscribe to our newsletter.
That's right. Subscribe to our newsletter where you will be getting a background on the exclusive story that you've just spoken about, philanthropists offering to buy Meanjin.
Yes, you will get all the detailed, excellent questions that nobody answered from Melbourne University Press, the full statement from Eli, the deputy editor, as well as a statement from the philanthropic organisation wanting to help, and also the person who did the review, the independent art consultant who did the review, and how shocked and disappointed she is. So that is for subscribers. If you aren't already a subscriber, please go to etmedia.com and subscribe. You'll also get other things like we are going to announce a national tour shortly, and you get first dibs on our tickets.
Yes, once we get our shit together.
Yes.
We do plan on doing that. And look, we totally understand that not everybody can subscribe with their dollars. So anywhere that you're watching this podcast, YouTube, if you're listening to it on whatever platform, hit subscribe, hit like, leave us a review, leave us a comment. All of this stuff really does help get our visibility up. And we would be much obliged. Next week, because we didn't let you know when we were doing the interview with Karishma, we're not going to make that mistake again.
Yes.
Speaking of live shows, we actually have a live show that we're doing this weekend in Melbourne. It is sold out, but I'm letting you know that because next week's episode is going to be our live show. So if you haven't got a ticket to it, fear not, my friends.
Yes.
You'll be able to listen to it in your ears next Wednesday.
Yeah, so this is with the Wheeler Centre. This one is essentially us doing the podcast live. So you're still going to get it's a no, it's a yes, all of the things. We are just doing it live. That is next week.
That's next week's show, exactly. And then the week after that, well, hopefully we're still here. You know what I mean? As my mum says, inshallah.
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 Inshallah khair.
Exactly. What a great way to leave it. We will catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.